This video is not about how to do wushu, but how to learn wushu. It's not step-by-step navigation, but a treasure map, ... X marks the spot. I'm going to tell you the number one thing that predicts whether or not someone will improve in their wushu. Hi, my name is Rebecca. I've done wushu for 10 years now. I started when I was 19, and since then I've been able to compete internationally and perform professionally. Wushu just captivates a certain kind of person. For whatever reason, some people just fall in love with wushu. On one of my first days of wushu practice, a more senior member said to me, that one caught the wushu bug. Hi, Alan. He was totally right, and since then, wushu became an enormous part of who I am. The funny thing is that this hasn't happened to just me. Over the years, I've met a number of wonderful weirdos from around the world who've just fallen in love with wushu. This is a wonderful and beautiful thing. However, wushu is actually really difficult to learn, not just because the skill set is complex, but it's also difficult to find a good training environment. I wanted to make this video as a high-level overview of advice and perspectives to help anyone get started on wushu. First, let's talk about what it means to train your fundamentals. So everybody says that it's important to train fundamentals, but I think that it's really easy to, one, put a lot of time and energy into the fundamentals without seeing any real improvements, and two, not see any improvements in your training and then think that the fundamentals aren't important and not prioritize them. The proven professional Chinese way of training wushu is to start from literally just the basics for years. I've heard this from multiple sources, including professional Chinese athletes, that in China, younger athletes' training really just focuses on the basics. For years, training every day, perfecting each movement, drilling for precision and intensity. Optional forms come years later once you have a solid foundation. At that point, it becomes clearer what movements you're good at naturally and what you're bad at. A form is choreographed to highlight the things that you're good at and minimize what you're bad at. I think it's easy to mistake fundamentals training as pointless repetition or to mistake it for just torturing yourself or being disciplined. It's also a mistake to think that the basics are just a warm-up for the real wushu. So then the question is, why? What are you gaining from doing the movement again and again? What's happening is that you're building the underlying skill of wushu. Strength and coordination at extended ranges of motion while connecting with other movements. You're practicing every movement so that every subcomponent is understood by your body, so that you can perform it well in different contexts, such as when you're tired in a form. Lots of art forms have analogous foundational components to their practice. For example, a musician might practice variations of scales and arpeggios in different keys with different intervals, tempos, and articulations. They refine their dexterity and control, which allows them to make real music possible. Likewise, ballet dancers spend a significant portion of every practice starting at the bar, doing the subcomponents of their movements before putting them together into more complex combinations. They don't just do this as beginners, but all throughout their careers. Wushu is no different. The fundamentals of wushu are just that, fundamental. They are a foundation to the movement art. In my opinion, to get better at basics is to get better at wushu. So what happens as you do a movement over and over? Every part of every move should be pushing some extreme. Wushu is a sport of extremes and contrasts. High, low, slow, fast, the height of a kick, the snappiness or elasticity, how relaxed you are, the sharpness, the extension. So how do you get a movement to be more extreme? Well, every time you do it, you try to make it a little bit more of whatever it's trying to be. When you first learn a movement, it's all about getting the overall shape and the idea right. But after that, you slowly build up those extremities. Faster, sharper, higher, crisper. Every time you kick, you're pushing the speed, the height. Every time you do an arm wheel, you're trying to turn your waist as powerfully as possible and to make those slaps as loud as possible. You want to have the sharpest dance transitions and the cleanest dances. High volume, repeating moves with the right intensity and intention, this is how you work on your basics. And that's why it's so impressive when basics are done well. It doesn't happen just by accident. It happens because someone incessantly chipped away again and again over many years. It reminds me of the phrase 水滴石穿, which means running water carved through stone, or that scene in Shaolin Temple when they're practicing Kung Fu. You look at the stones beneath their feet and you see that they're worn away where the stances are. Yes, wushu and kung fu are not the same thing, and you can't see the outcome of your wushu in the stones under your feet, but there are actual muscular and neurological changes happening as you do your fundamentals, especially with the right intensity and intention. Every single rep, slowly carving away the stone within you. So the first thing that you need to know if you're going to learn wushu is to start with the basics and honor that part of your practice, because that's how you'll get better at wushu. If you're completely new to wushu, then you probably have no idea what basics are and how to practice them well, which brings me to the next point and is also, in my opinion, the single biggest predictor of whether or not someone will improve at wushu. That thing is having a coach. When I meet athletes and then see them again in 6 months or a year, the ones who make the most progress are the ones who are actively working with a coach. Obviously, there are other confounding variables here, like whether or not they have a consistent place to train or whether they have teammates to train with, but it's my personal opinion that the coach makes the most difference. Maybe I'm preaching to the choir here, but you'd be surprised how many people out there think that they can train without a coach. There are rare exceptions of incredibly talented, smart people who are able to figure out wushu on their own, but that was not me, and it's improbable that it's you. A coach is important for a few reasons. The first is that wushu is most effectively passed on by tradition, from person to person. Wushu is a complex art form. Every stance, every movement has nuance to it, and every combination has even more complexity. There's a lot more than can be effectively communicated over text or pictures. It's happened so many times to me that a coach will look at what I'm doing and then, rather than checking any external reference book or anything, they check their muscle memory to see whether or not it was correct and how to do it better. That's where the knowledge is. It's inside of them, and they can share that knowledge with you every time they give you feedback. The fundamental unit of wushu improvement is that you do a movement, the coach gives you some feedback, and then you try again and the coach tells you if you did it or not. You repeat this interaction again and again over the hour, over the weeks, over the years, and that is how you get good at wushu. In addition to wushu knowledge, coaches also provide accountability and are extremely helpful in knowing how hard to push you. Wushu tends to attract the kind of person who kind of likes pain, and it's a super common failure mode for a wushu person to see themselves as lazy and useless, and then push themselves too hard, and then tire themselves out, and then feel lazy and useless. It's a cycle. Anyway, my advice to you, if you can, get a coach. Of course, finding a coach is not easy if you live somewhere other than China or maybe the Bay Area, California. Wushu is extremely niche, and there's a really finite number of people who can effectively teach. If you are serious about learning wushu and you don't live somewhere with a coach, my honest advice is to explore locations that have wushu schools and see if it's feasible for you to move there or at least occasionally visit. You and everyone in your life might think that you're kind of crazy for it, but myself and a lot of people I've known over the years have really built their lives around wushu because they've realized that that's what's important to them and lived accordingly. If there's absolutely no way that you can go to a wushu school, I'm also interested in finding ways to effectively share my wushu knowledge online. If that's something that's interesting to you, leave me a comment so that I know you exist. The next thing to consider on your wushu journey is your overall athleticism and health. Wushu is extremely physically demanding. Even the most basic stance, the horse stance, is extremely difficult for a lot of adults on their first day because it requires real hip mobility to get into the right position. You might hear people say that wushu is bad for your knees, but that's not inherently true. Moving your body weight in extreme positions without proper strength and mobility is bad for your knees. Wushu is not inherently bad for your knees. I have made a list of 3 basic fitness goals that you should keep in the back of your mind if you want to learn wushu. Don't stop yourself from training until you've reached these goals. Keep chipping away at them to supplement your training. This will prevent your improvement from getting blocked by your fitness as well as prevent injury. The first fitness goal is just to start building strength. If you've never lifted weights before, a good place to start is learning to squat and hinge with proper form. The squat and the hinge are foundational to human movement, so being able to move weight around in these patterns will serve you well. At the beginning, you don't even have to worry about the number that you're lifting, but do learn the proper mechanics of squatting and hinging to start being able to build your strength up. The second thing to be working on is building your flexibility. Start working on your splits and head to toe. By that I mean right split, left split, and middle split, and then a head to toe is when you touch your forehead to your toe with a straight leg. I know it sounds ridiculous, but if you work to it consistently over a long period of time, there's a good chance that you can get to it. Someone once told me that when you have all 3 splits and head to toe, that's when wushu starts. That's not entirely true. You can learn a lot of wushu before you can do this, but start stretching. Having good flexibility will prevent injury and make your wushu really look like wushu. Finally, you're going to want to get a really good handle on your nutrition. A solid goal is to eat 80 to 90% whole foods rather than processed foods. Make sure that you're getting enough protein and vegetables, healthy carbs, healthy fats, and avoid excess sugar. I know this is a lot easier said than done. Actually, there was a point in my wushu journey where proper nutrition was actually the hardest part of what I was doing, but the difficulty varies for a lot of people. Starting to work towards a balanced diet will help you fuel your training, recover, and prevent injuries. For all of these goals, building strength, building flexibility, and eating well, there really exists a wealth of YouTube knowledge out there. None of these goals are urgent, and I don't think that it's worth stalling your wushu training while you work on them, but start chipping away at them and they'll help you level up your wushu and prevent injuries. Another extremely important thing to do while training wushu that's not wushu is to watch wushu. Again, the same goes for any other art form that you're learning. I took a few months of jazz piano in college, and the teacher would always send me home with recommendations for jazz albums to listen to. My advice to you, watch old school wushu, watch new school wushu, watch even older school wushu and even newer school wushu. Find what you're interested, what movements you like, and what makes you feel something. Watch Jet Li movies, or if you don't want to watch the whole movie, you can watch Jet Li montages, watch Jackie Chan, watch Shang-Chi. You can watch things that aren't exactly wushu, like K-pop Demon Hunters or the Blue Eye Samurai. You should watch yourself doing wushu, and if you go to class, you should watch other people doing wushu. If you're a beginner and you want a concrete exercise to get yourself starting to watch wushu, record yourself doing whatever you're working on. It can be basics, a beginner form, and then find a video of a professional doing the same movements. Compare back and forth your video with theirs to see if you can tell the difference. How is their rhythm different from yours? Are they relaxed? How do their shapes and stances compare? How crisp are their movements compared to yours? Watch for subtle changes in body position. Watch for stopping and acceleration. See how many differences you can find, and then pick one thing to work on. If you want to watch wushu on YouTube, these are my recommendations for the best resources. For old school wushu, definitely check out jayo.com. Brandon has a ton of fantastic videos in his wushu archive from competitions from the 80s and 90s. It is really a fantastic collection of wushu. Chobi Studio 4207 has a lot of fantastic videos from the 90s and 2000s. Yinglong 999 has a lot of old golden nuggets from the past eras of wushu, as well as a lot of modern wushu. And then my friend Mark Moran at Wushu Adventures has a ton of fantastic footage from China from his travels from the 2000s and the 2010s. Finally, Blue Hippo Films has a ton of high quality footage, mostly of modern wushu. And as far as tutorials go, my favorite resource on YouTube is Cause Wushu, the school in Argentina led by Chen Min. The content is in Spanish, but I don't think you really need to understand the words to get the content. Li Jing from Kung Fu Acting Star Academy also has excellent videos. Huge shout out to all of these people who consolidate all of this wushu. It is really a service to wushu and a huge gift to all of us who get to watch it. The last thing that I wanted to say is more of a meta-level perspective, and that is to remind you that wushu is really hard. A lot of people discover wushu later in life, and that makes it even harder than if they'd started as a kid. I trained with a coach and his 2 young daughters. Honestly, the girls didn't love wushu as much as I did, but they were younger, they had more energy, and they had the genetics of 2 pro athletes' parents. They picked up on things way faster, they could train more hours than me, and they improved much more quickly. I'd be lying if I said that this wasn't really discouraging sometimes. You'll probably face similar situations. Maybe it's because of your age that wushu is just hard. I've known people who've had a hard time putting on muscle or losing weight, or some people are just naturally really inflexible or prone to a certain type of injury. Maybe there's no way that you can live near a wushu school. Whatever it is, when you start wushu, the challenges will find you. However, at any point you might feel discouraged, you can take a step back and be like, well, I'm on this mountain. It's really challenging. Other people have other paths and can move much faster than me. Do I still want to climb this mountain? Maybe the answer is no, and that's okay. But if the answer is yes, then you can actively choose to say, yes, this is my path. I choose wushu, or maybe wushu chose me, and there are some challenges, but I still want to climb. I accept that there are challenges on the path that I've chosen, and I still want to do this. It's the people who can do that that will get somewhere in wushu. I know it's easier said than done, but if you can get there, if you can have this mindset, then you'll be unstoppable. Anyway, I hope this video helps you learn wushu. If it does, leave me a comment to let me know. Thanks!